Yeah, fix that lighting a little bit there.
Yeah. All right. Perfect. All right. Thanks, everyone who's tuning in now. Again, my name is Jared Kotler, host of the Connecticut Scoreboard podcast. And tonight we've got a really special guest joining us for tonight's Connecticut college basketball chatter, and that's ESPN's Joe Lunardi. Joe, thanks so much for hopping on with us tonight.
Jared, it's hard for me to believe that you could have taken my class and still become successful. Most everybody else flamed out.
I try.
How are you?
Good. I'm doing well. How are you doing? I like to see you're in a bit of brighter room than the typical bracket bunker they've got you in come February and March.
Well, I've actually taken over one of my daughter's rooms for bracketing and office purposes for the season. This is one of the advantages of being empty nesters, I guess.
So, Joe, let's dive right into it. This season is going to be unlike anything we've ever seen before. Take us through what it's been like for you in trying to figure out how to even put together a bracket so early in the season, as we get ready, with the season having just kicked off.
Yeah, I mean, where to even start? I think it's important kind of for everyone to appreciate the fact that we're playing games at all, right? Like part of me, the non-bracketologist part of me says, this is nuts. It's hard for me to even get my head around the fact that teams are traveling and trying to keep the schedules that they are. But then you look at the flip side of what took place in Connecticut, up at Mohegan for a couple of weeks. And I've talked to a number of coaches and media who were there, and they've just raved about not only the quality of basketball, which I think we all saw is pretty good, but the administrative aspects and the medical aspects at keeping everyone and everything kind of safe and on track. What does that mean when you look out over the next 3 or 4 months? We're getting daily cancellations of games, or at least postponements, and I can't imagine that won't continue, because like I can read a newspaper, and it doesn't seem like the numbers are great, and if there's a national pause, it wouldn't surprise me. I guess the bottom line is nothing will surprise me at this point, given that everything in life is so uncertain.
One thing that really interested me that you're doing early on, and I saw this, you're putting out brackets not only just for 68 teams this year, but you've got a 48-team bracket, a 16-team bracket. Take us through kind of the mindset of coming up with a few different contingency brackets, if we want to call them that.
Yeah, I would like to take credit for this idea, but I can't. The college basketball editor over at ESPN.com is a good guy and a smart guy by the name of Tony Moss, and it's hard for me to give Tony any credit at all because he went to LaSalle, but in spite of that, we get along and we share a little Philadelphia Big Five camaraderie. And he said, what do you think would be some of the ways that this could go if it gets off track? And that was where the idea was kind of born. So now every week when we do an update, we do the regular 68-team field, and then I kind of made some new bracketing rules for a 48-team field, in which 16 would get a bye, 32 would play on home courts, to get to 32 at a central site, and then just a straight old top 16 which would reflect the 1 through 4 seeds in each of the regions, which is something that they actually tried to put in motion last March when the full tournament was falling apart. Hey, could we wait a couple weeks and get
Squeeze in
at least something so that those of us out there who are addicted to this sport would have something to hang on to. But the whole pandemic was so fresh at that time.
Yeah.
And I think back, the Sweet 16 would have taken place at Madison Square Garden in late March at a time when New York City and Manhattan were
shut down completely.
And I think it's important, again, taking my non-bracketology position, like we're in the toy department of life here in college basketball. And, if I got a phone call now that no games were going to be played until like next November, for the good of the country, I think we would have to accept that. Doesn't mean we'd have to like it, but it also doesn't seem all that outlandish to me.
One thing I want to start by looking at is right now we're in the non-conference schedule. Teams across the country have just had such a variety of non-conference schedules. Some have played just a few games. Here you look at UConn, they've played a total of 3 games before they've had to go on pause again. Had a couple games canceled due to COVID issues. DePaul in the Big East hasn't played at all, and they probably won't play any non-conference games. Usually the non-conference is a great way for teams to build their resume heading into March. How do you think this year's non-conference is going to be viewed, with some teams, maybe playing 5 to 8 non-conference games versus some who get 0 to 2 in?
I think it's a great question. It is the question, really, for the moment, in terms of trying to predict what the selection and seeding process might be like 3 months from now. The best way I can kind of explain it is, and the only way I think that the committee can go about it, and in speaking to some folks, the NCAA and a couple of committee members that I was in touch with before the season got started, like, don't we just have to revert to common sense here? Like what's that Occam's razor? Like, the simplest solution is sometimes the obvious answer.
Yeah.
Like, if an obviously good team, like a really good team, doesn't play half its games, but they're clearly one of the best teams, then they have to be in the tournament, right? And you have to do your best to seed them accordingly. And on the other end, if you've got some team, I don't know, pick a really deep league like the Big Ten, right? Like, let's say Minnesota plays like 3 non-league games and 18 league games, and they go 6-12. Right?
Right.
Like, we're going to hear that, yeah, but 5 of those 6 wins would have been quad 1. Well, like, my argument would be, yeah, but what about the other 12?
Yep.
Like, all this team really proved was inability to lose to good teams. So, like, give me East Tennessee State at 28-2.
Yeah.
But I don't know that the committee's going to lean in that direction. And this really, I would like a mulligan on my bracketology score for this year. But on the other hand, I realize that the ability to make a reasonably educated guess at how this is going to play out is going to be valuable to media and broadcasters and even coaches and ADs as they go through this season, because, like, somebody needs to be creating a baseline.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I'm the authority, God help us, but I do have a reasonable amount of experience at this, and it overlaps multiple generations of committee members in applying kind of past decision making to current events. Like
Mhm.
a lawyer would look at case law, right?
Right.
Try and guide him or her through something weird today. Like, in a way, that's what I do.
Right.
And I think it should really be deemed, I should be deemed an essential worker and
You're
compensated accordingly.
you've got an ologist at the end of your name.
Yeah,
We're
this
hearing a lot about
probably
epidemiologists. You bracketologists, we'll throw you right in.
yeah, this is not my ology. And the world should be thankful for that.
Joe, speaking of some of the variety and the number of games teams will be playing, last week on this show, I had John Gallagher at Hartford, who, by the way, just texted in, said to say hello to you. Misses hearing from you. We had him.
I am really sorry to hear that you had Gal on.
We had him in.
With no other English-speaking person available?
He was joined by Anthony Latina at Sacred Heart. We had the two of them together. They're a fun combo.
Well, I don't know Anthony, but I know that John has been stealing money pretty much his whole life.
So the two of them were talking about the magic number put out there by the NCAA of 13 games to qualify for the tournament, and how they both think it's going to be really hard to get in 13 games.
Then they'll change the number.
And that was my question. Is that something? And I guess we'll see. I mean, we're seeing what the Big Ten's kind of doing to manipulate football a bit to get Ohio State in the playoff. Do you see, possibly down the road having that change that number? And it seems like yes.
You really think if Gonzaga's only played 12 games that they're not going to do something?
Gonzaga maybe, Duke no, definitely, but no.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit more optimistic about getting in the games.
Mm-hmm.
At least that number, because maybe the NCAA's assumption is we are not moving the tournament back no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and maybe their backroom conversations with CBS and Turner are to that end, right? Like, you're having a tournament, and that's great. And if you don't get it in before the Masters, you're toast.
Yeah.
Right. Like, maybe that's the conversation. So the NCAA is like, well, okay, we'll give teams roughly half a season. My assumption has always been if things go completely sideways, and I'm talking about from a national health perspective, not from a basketball perspective, that they'll just move it back until teams do get in a representative number of games. That's just kind of where I see it, and maybe if the numbers of games are really low, and the tournament is forced to start when typically it has started on or about, maybe we need to adopt the college professor approach to evaluating teams, which, like, how many times do we hear the prof say, I'm going to grab all your papers and throw them down the steps, and the ones that land on this step get an A, and this step get a B, and this step get an F. Maybe we should do that with resumes.
There have been so many different methods people have thrown out there for how this tournament should be seeded. Some say, oh, well, let's take, the ACC, they've gotten X number of bids on average each year. Mm-hmm. Let's give them that. What are your thoughts on an approach like that in such a crazy year like this?
I actually think it's reasonably decent. I know it kind of goes against one of the fundamental tenets of bracketology, which is every team, every season, every league is its own entity. Nothing about the past should inform the current situation, right? Like if we always did it that way and we did it for seeding and selection, well, a Dayton or a San Diego State would never get a number one seed,
right?
As could have happened a year ago, right?
Right.
So while I get that, I think we are talking about fairly extraordinary circumstances,
Mhm.
and I could see it to some, like, the math of it makes sense to me. I don't think it's ever going to happen.
Mhm.
It's just it's just never going to happen.
When it comes to
Politics.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
not going to happen.
When it comes to conference play, really going to be the key this year. How do you think these mid-major schools are going to get treated that might not have the opportunities to pick up a couple quality wins in the non-conference schedule, and instead now, run through the conference, of a one-bid league, losing the title game?
Mm-hmm.
You see any opportunities for them extra? I mean, I know we'll have a couple extra bids. No Ivy this year, opens up
Right.
one there. But how do you see mid majors being treated this year, given the circumstances?
So my knee-jerk reaction is to say badly,
Mm,
that they will be treated, you know,
yeah.
because again, you're sitting in a room and you're saying, okay, Minnesota has 4 wins over ranked teams, and I don't know, Furman doesn't have any.
Right.
Okay,
Which way?
well, what does that mean? Like, should we just assume that putting losing teams in the field is okay? Uh, and my years and years of doing this suggests that, not that the rules are going to be bent, but that the evaluation process kind of has a bit of a confirmation bias to it toward the
Yeah.
power conferences and the brand name programs, and generally they are better for lots of, not the
Mhm.
least of which is they spend the most money on it, and they just have better players. But I'm always arguing not for like a mid-major or a low-major revolution. I'm only arguing that at the margin, poor decisions are made on 2 or 3 teams a year,
Right.
and 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 the data over time overwhelmingly suggests not that East Tennessee State is better than Syracuse, but that the collective East Tennessee states over a period of 10 or 15 years outperform the losing major conference teams in the tournament,
Mhm.
even though they get fewer chances and worse seeding. Like, this is all demonstrable fact. Like,
Right.
I'm not getting on a soapbox here. I'm like I have the data, okay, because I'm a little bored in the summer. Like, I have it. It exists, and I can tell you that a certain class of team outperforms another class of team. And when something like that happens for a long enough period of time, I think it should maybe influence the discussion a bit,
Mhm.
right? And uh, and I think that the reason they outperform them is kind of simple. They're better at basketball, and because of that, they win more games.
Mhm.
Like now, I sound like Mrs. Claus or something. Like like it like most of the time in most comparisons,
Mhm.
a team from a mid-major and a team from the ACC deserves to be selected,
Mhm.
right? But
Right.
I'm saying that just because the facts justify that 98% of the time
There's
doesn't
still
mean in the 2%
right.
it applies.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the committee has continued to apply them.
Mhm.
And in my case, in my judgment, erroneously. Um, so so my knee-jerk reaction to your question is, how will they treat the mid-majors on the edge, is to say badly. But then I'm also kind of reminded that this is going to be the most unpredictable thing we've ever seen in college basketball. So
If there's a year to do it.
maybe I'm wrong. Because they can kind of get away and justify almost anything.
Right.
And people are going to give them, as big a mulligan as there is to give in bracketology. I just want one too.
We'll give you one. We'll give you one, at least in my book. Again, for everyone who's joining us, we got Joe Lunardi on the line here talking bracketology early season here. If you got questions, feel free to throw them in the chat and we'll get to them. One thing I know that I got a lot of in advance was around UConn and being back in the Big East this year. A lot of fans felt that the American held UConn back, possibly, when they were in contention for the NCAA tournament. In terms of seeding and just the strength of the conference in general, how does the jump to the Big East impact UConn in terms of its resume quality, and some of the benefits that come with being in the conference now?
Well, I think two things can be true that sound like they're in conflict. Being back in the Big East is great for UConn. That doesn't mean that being in the American was bad for UConn. Mm. I don't believe that. I'm pretty sure they won a national championship as a member of the American.
Yep.
And that in women's basketball, they never lost a game in the American. Now, the UConn women could probably be in the NBA West and never lose a game also. But we digress a bit. Like, I don't think the American held UConn back. I think UConn held UConn back, both with issues on and off the court. Mm. And those seem to either be completely resolved or certainly resolving. And, I think we're going to see Danny Hurley have a lot of success in the Big East, and it's going to be credited to UConn's move back to the Big East when they were probably on the verge of a lot of success anyway. Mm-hmm. If UConn was in the American this year, they'd still be a tournament team. Now, the recruits that are coming going forward, maybe some of them wouldn't have signed up
if they were
if they were still in the American. I'll give you that. I'm not in the recruiting meetings. So, I see it that way. And I pay a fair amount of attention to UConn for a number of reasons. One is, ESPN's in Connecticut, and I spend a lot of time in Connecticut, and a ton of people from UConn work at ESPN, so I get asked about them a ton. And, in the Northeast, at least, the Big East is on about, every 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So you can't kind of miss it. And I remember a lot of great UConn games and UConn rivalries in the Big East. And certainly as a basketball fan, I'm happy to see this. And it makes all the sense in the world. I'll just be interested, this is a mess, what's happening
right
in terms of COVID. I know at one point they were supposed to play 3 games last week, right?
Right. Played one.
They were supposed to play USC, BYU, and NC State.
Vanderbilt.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And, it all just
fell apart. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that's why, when I'm asked by schools, and I had a consult with a school in the Midwest right before I came on with you. And, this school has an opportunity to jump into one of those spots that looks like it's going to be open in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, with a couple of the ACC schools maybe having to bail. And it would involve playing on no days rest, like playing a game Tuesday, getting on a plane and going. The question being, how do you think this impacts our resume?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I said, it seems to me that you have to take the opportunity that's right in front of you, because you don't know what's going to happen to your schedule a week or a month from now. And if that means, getting on a bus or getting on a plane and traveling through the night to to get a quality opponent, well,
You're going to do it.
maybe you need to do it, provided that your kids are safe and your program is not harmed in the long run, and we're keeping up with our academics and our health and safety protocols and all those things that should be standard.
So putting on that consultancy hat, you've got UConn as a 10 seed in the latest bracketology. Everyone's going
to there's one coming out tomorrow.
Oh, all right. So we won't spoil where they are unless you want to give us the ultimate.
I gotta look, and I'll say that it looks like the weather forecast has not changed.
Okay. All right. So if we've got them at a 10, what's it going to take for UConn to continue to boost their seeding? How do you think it's going to have to play out for them in their first year back in the Big East in terms of record? I think it's interesting, since I don't think UConn fans necessarily know what to expect out of the Big East, what type of record they would need within the conference to pursue a higher seed this year.
Well, they're supposed to play 20 league games, right? Yeah. If they go 11-9, they're a lock to make the tournament, in my judgment.
All right.
And let's say that even at 10-10, or maybe 9-11, if the 9 is kind of the right 9,
yeah,
it'll probably be enough. And I would say, and this is a really like a spitballing kind of an assessment, let's say for every win above, if 11-9 makes you a lock,
yeah,
every win above that should be a seed line.
Okay.
Roughly.
Interesting. Yeah.
Okay. So,
you heard it. You
want to be 14-6.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
All right.
Obviously that's UConn in a narrow vacuum when they're actually being evaluated again, kind of horizontally across the board.
Yeah. One thing I think we always hear about every year in bracketology, and that's the impact of the eye test. I know the committee doesn't say they use it. There have been some people out there saying, hey,
they do.
This year might be the most important. Yeah.
Some committee members are not metrics people.
Yeah.
There are fewer of them now. But, they can use the rubber chicken test if they want. They really have no criteria that they're obligated to follow.
In a year like this, do you think you see maybe a move away from some of the analytics and more of an eye test type thing? Like, hey, this team had a pause here. Look how they came out after that compared to how they are now. Things along that way of thinking.
Again, what a lot of people, including probably some committee members, are going to call the eye test, I would call the application of common sense. Like, I actually can't think of many dumber things than the eye test. And here's why I say that. I've heard media and coaches and even committee members say, well, I mean, look at that team. They have 2 lottery picks. Or they look, what did Al McGuire used to say? All airport team, they look great in the airport. Because they're big and strong and muscular and, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, like, I would say and again, we're only applying the eye test in terms of teams right on the cut line.
Right.
Like you don't need any kind of test to know that Baylor's good. Right? All you have to do is, like, look at the standings. Right? I mean, I guess you could be applying it in terms of seeding, but we're really talking about selection here when we're talking about the eye test. And what I would say is, if you're using the eye test to justify the selection of a team, that means they probably didn't win enough games.
Okay.
In which case, my answer to the question of the statement, well, but they passed the eye test because they have 3 lottery picks, would be, well, if they have 3 lottery picks, why didn't they win 2 more games?
Yeah.
If they're that good, why couldn't they win a road game? If they're that good, why did they just go 2-9 down the stretch? Like,
yeah.
So, and my metaphor to this, because I like baseball, and I'm a Phillies fan, the Phillies once had a player named Von Hayes, who they traded 5 guys to get because he was like the perfect baseball player. Long, lanky, Ted Williams swing, like straight out of Central Casting. Well, Von Hayes was a nice baseball player, but he really didn't hit for much power or get on bases. He was not the superstar that people thought.
Yeah.
He passed the eye test.
But not
John Kruk, who succeeded Von Hayes, famously went on Letterman, said, "We're not athletes, we're ball players." Now, John Kruk was fat and slow and had cancer, but he walked a lot, got a lot of extra base hits, and put a lot of runs on the scoreboard. So you want the eye test or the runs?
Right.
I'll take the runs.
Well, yeah. One piece of kind of, I guess, part of that equation that you mentioned there is road games. Without having fans at most of the arenas this year, is there going to be as much value in a road win as there would be normally?
Well, they haven't changed any of the metrics to my knowledge.
Okay.
What the question is, should they?
Yeah.
Okay. Or should that, somehow be a little sidebar to the evaluation process a little bit?
Right.
And I guess my answer to that is, let's go through, half of a conference season. Let's get to the end of January and let's see what the record of
road teams,
home teams is. Like, for decades, home teams have won in Division I men's college basketball about 70% of the time. If that number turns out to be 55%, 20 games in, okay, then I think we need to look at it.
Yeah.
My gut is telling me that it's still going to be pretty close to 70.
All right, that's gonna be the number. Everyone.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I think it'll be less, but I don't think it's going to be like less than 65.
Yeah.
Like for one reason, the numbers are skewed by the fact that the best teams play more home games to begin with.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's not changing with or without fans.
Right.
Like, Duke is still not playing any road games.
Yep.
Okay. So, ergo, if Duke goes 9-1, they're going to be 9-1 at home.
Yeah.
And we're still talking about kids getting on a bus, getting on a plane, being out of their routine.
Right. Even more.
This isn't LeBron playing 4 games in 5 nights with, a private suite, a personal trainer, a chef, and a charter jet.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's still some inconvenience and hardship with travel and maybe this kind of latent anxiety of being out and about in the world.
Right.
Right? Like, I'm in my daughter's bedroom. I'm not in a studio.
Yeah.
Okay. So, a little less maybe, but not my gut is that road wins are still going to be more valuable by a decent amount.
This year, the tournament's planned to all be played in Indianapolis, in that area.
Well, they haven't announced that yet.
Not officially, but
a central site.
Yeah. How does that change your thinking in terms of the seating in particular? Now that you could kind of throw location out the window there, are you going to get more of a pure seed line this year?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, yeah. You can pretty much just go down the seed list in that S-curve fashion, or fantasy football players would know it as a snake draft, right? Yeah. And all you have to do is make sure you don't have first round rematches, and teams from the same conference are separated enough in the bracket so that they don't meet too soon to violate the rematch rules in those instances. So it makes building a bracket a good bit easier, and balancing it easier. It doesn't make creating the seed list any different. It just makes, putting them into the field. Now, not only easier, but I guess because we're used to the geographic considerations, maybe it makes it a little more boring. Or maybe they come up, the committee meets monthly. Maybe they come up with some rules in January to spice it up. Who knows?
This year in particular, I think just given how crazy things have been, and not necessarily knowing what to expect out of some teams right out of the gate, given, whether they had a COVID pause or just that they're a younger team and trying to get in the grips of things. How would you say, if you had to pick kind of a early bracket winner and a bracket loser so far this season compared, to 2 weeks into the season compared to where you had them, at the start of the year?
Yeah, I mean, teams that can just get in games, right? And maybe thrive at a level higher than they were originally picked. I think of, a team like Texas winning the non-Maui Invitational last week in Asheville, North Carolina. They wouldn't have been picked to win that event. I mean,
Right.
Other teams were going to be in that event to some degree.
Right.
And they went, they got out of it with a win 4-0, and they lose a tight one at home to Villanova on Sunday, which should give pause, by the way, to other Big East teams that think Villanova's vulnerable this year to get knocked off that mountain.
Yeah.
So, teams that playing a lot of games and then succeeding in those games.
Mm-hmm.
Texas and another team from their state, Houston, come to mind, who've kind of overperformed and advanced their cause a little bit. And then, I guess the obvious one that hasn't is Kentucky.
Yeah.
At 1-3. I still have every, reason to think that talent will win the day in Lexington. Maybe not as a number 1 seed, but still as a very dangerous team come March or April or May or June or whenever we have a tournament. And I think that speaks to, okay, it's got to be harder to get a team of young guys ready and at a high level, with goofy practice schedules and not. I mean, look, like coaching is a hand-holding kind of profession at a lot of levels, and we can't hold hands right now.
Right. I'm curious, how do you evaluate a team like a UConn right now that's on a pause, as other teams might say, climb that bracket and be worthy of, say, a 10 seed? Do you hold UConn at a 10, saying they don't play for the next 2 or 3 weeks? What happens to a school like that in a pause in your projections as the season goes along?
Well, they're going to get passed.
Yeah.
While they're standing still, particularly in that range of seed, 10, 11, 12, everybody's so close.
Yeah.
So, if Marquette can beat a Wisconsin while UConn's on pause, and if Marquette was in 11 last week, well, maybe they're 9 in the bracket tomorrow. So, while UConn's treading water,
right,
somebody is swimming laps.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's also teams that are losing while UConn is playing.
Right. It's balanced.
Right? But the universe of teams that can pass them is larger than the universe of teams that can fall behind them.
Right.
Because if you're a 10 seed, let's say you're 40th in the country, well, so that means 40 ahead of you. Well, there's 300 behind you.
Mm-hmm.
So there's more chasers than chasees.
Yeah.
Right? And they're all chasing teams like UConn. Tennessee hasn't played. They started as a top 10 team. They're through no fault of their own, they're losing a little bit of ground.
Yeah.
Right? They're not out campaigning, so the other candidate's getting more votes.
Yeah. Fair. Again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat here. But Joe, I'll kind of wrap things up here. Kind of go with a gut feel here. Do you think come March we're having a 68 team event?
Yeah, I do. I could see it starting later.
Mm-hmm.
I could see us having a pause for the whole sport sometime after the holidays. And it could be, mid to late. I don't know what, like,
Yeah.
and maybe it's like, hey, let's take a couple weeks. Let's get everybody vaccinated. Let's make sure it works.
Yeah.
Like then we can play our last 10 games in our postseason and have a conference tournament, maybe even have fans.
Right.
Right? Like if it looks like they can have fans in April or May,
they're
then I could see it moving back. But yeah, I do believe that there will be an NCAA champion, and in a perverted way, just because of timing, none of our major sports have been as adversely impacted.
Right.
Because clearly when the pandemic started, no sport took it on the chin more abruptly or more, in more damaging fashion.
Yeah.
Even the others, hockey and basketball, pro basketball, they were able to resume
and finish the season. Yeah.
Right. And now what are we having, the surge and the surge on a surge and all that right when college basketball is trying to start.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean college basketball did anything wrong. It's just bad luck.
Bad timing. Yeah.
Right. It right. And who knows if 2 months, I know that there are a lot of people who think we should have waited.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that there's a right or wrong to that. Again, not my ology.
Yeah.
My job is to evaluate the games that are played, not tell them when to have them.
One more that just came to mind while I've got you. Some conferences have debated moving conference play into some sort of bubble environment. Mm-hmm. Would you view teams that, in a conference that have played in a bubble different than one that are playing home and road games?
Good question. I hadn't really thought about having to compare one set of teams to a different set based on that.
Yeah.
Reality. I'm going to do the common sense rule again. Like, I don't know what that would look like.
Yeah.
But I think that, the tournament itself is going to be mostly in a bubble.
Right.
Right. So if leagues do that for some league games and or their postseason tournament, that'll be comparable. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like watching that Villanova Texas game yesterday, that was, was clearly in the Irwin Center and a home game for Texas. Right. And they even had a couple thousand fans there. But I've been in that arena and it was still pretty empty.
Right.
And they had the plexiglass and the broadcasters way up high and, the players sitting, in folding chairs with me. Yeah. It's bubble-like in those settings. So I think you have to just kind of compare teams at face value.
All right.
Who'd you play? Who'd you beat?
All right. I like it. Joe Lunardi, really appreciate the time tonight. Thanks for hopping on.
Sure thing, Jared.
UConn fans, don't chirp him too much, right, Joe, on Twitter?
Yeah, they've been pretty good to me this year so far.
Yeah, so far? Yeah.
I haven't been in Connecticut yet.
Yeah. Well, you got.
I like to keep that under the radar because I don't want them to meet me at the state line.
Joe, appreciate the time and enjoy all what we've got this season.
That's all we can do.
Exactly.
Hey, I heard GW played today.
Yeah, not great. Not great for my Colonials.
Wow, you're not the best team that's ever lost to UMBC.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Go Hawks, right? I'll pull.
And any team that has a Jameer Nelson is okay with me.
There we go.
I had a pic in this room behind me. There is a picture of my daughter holding who we called Mir back in the day. So,
look at that. Small world.
How about that? I can't reach it and talk to you at the same time. You just have to believe me.
I'll believe you, Joe.
Okay.
All right. Joe Lunardi, thanks again. We appreciate the time.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.